Mackayla, big up.
Yeah,
How you doing?
good.
Everything good?
Everything's airy. Everything's
Love to hear
nice.
that. Love to hear that. All right, welcome to Too Much Information. Um,
hmm
so happy to have you.
Thanks
We
for
spoke.
having me.
No, you're more than welcome. We've spoken briefly before, and I just expressed to you then, someone that I definitely wanted to speak to. Definitely somebody whose story I wanted to be a part of sharing with the greater world, greater community, and so yeah, I really appreciate you doing this.
No worries. No
All
worries.
right,
Should be.
all right.
It's gonna be fun.
Yes, yes, that's the plan. That's the plan. And this is
Yeah.
part one. This is part one. I'm making
hmm
sure that we do another one where we can
Oh
delve
God.
deeper into some deep and deeper, mysterious, political, philosophical debates on some stuff, you know?
They're in for a treat, innit?
Yeah, you don't know. That's the truth. That is the truth. All right. So, how I
Right.
usually start is with upbringing. So, I'm talking family, how were you raised, who were you raised
Mm,
with, um,
mm.
as a starting point. So, yeah,
Okay. Upbringing. Well,
yeah,
born in South London in Dulwich
okay,
Hospital.
okay,
Um, First home was grandma's home, grandma and granddad. They
right,
come from the Caribbean, they're from Barbados.
okay,
They were the Windrush generation type. You know, grandma came to work as a nurse, granddad came to work on the railway. So I lived there for a very long time as a small child.
mm-hmm,
And then we moved to Greenwich, where I grew up on an estate,
okay,
Meridian Estate. Actually, that's actually become a thing recently. Like the young people, they're making tunes about being from Meridian and that.
yeah,
When I
the
was growing
Meridian,
up there,
go on.
yeah, there was nothing fashionable about being from Meridian when I was a youth. Do you know what I mean? Everyone was broke. Um,
Yeah, no,
but
Meridian, there's a Meridian in my ends as well.
oh,
So,
for real?
yeah, all them boy better know boys, that's where they're from, innit? So,
Yeah. Well,
mm,
I'm from like southeast, like Greenwich, Lewisham,
okay,
Deptford, New
oh,
Cross. But
okay,
so yeah, I grew up in Greenwich. You know, my mum worked. Like I grew up with my little brother. He's a few years younger than me.
right,
My mum worked as a chef and caterer for a long time. You know, 3-4 jobs at a time. Do you know what I'm saying? So,
yeah,
you know, it was just us three. It was just us three.
okay,
And yeah, I mean, back then when you lived on the block, everybody kind of looked out for everybody. So like you had
okay,
your mum,
yeah,
but you had everyone else's parents watching out for you too. So I was
yeah,
just
yeah,
saying to my partner the other day that there was nothing you could do on road, yeah, and then come home and your mum didn't know before you even got home.
facts,
You know what I'm saying? So I grew up in that era where, you know, you can get up to no foolishness on the street because
mm-hmm,
everyone and their auntie would have told your mum before you even touched the doorstep. Um, and yeah, we grew up kind of, my mum was very like, she was very up on us knowing our history, very up on us reading.
right,
My mum spent a lot of time. I mean, the time that she did get to spend with us was like usually trying to educate us. So we had
okay,
like all of the encyclopedias, How My Body Works books, you know what I'm saying? Like the whole collection,
no,
you know, that encyclopedia set that every black family has.
like with the
Yeah,
red cover, the red leather cover.
right.
Don't worry, I had it too, don't worry.
Right. You understand? So
Yeah,
I kind of grew up in a home where we didn't have much, you know, we was very poor,
mm-hmm,
but I had loads of books. I had loads and loads of books.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the basics of it. I didn't grow with my dad.
okay,
Dad, I only met last year.
right,
So, and my brother's dad, we have different dads. He wasn't around either. So it was kind of very much a family headed by my mum, you
okay,
know, with my grandparents and my uncle's input, you know.
okay.
Yeah.
So what? So obviously I was well, not obviously, but I was raised by my mum as well. So
Mm.
I'm just curious, the type of um, the type of person she is,
Mm.
or was at that time,
Mm-hmm.
um, for you growing up as a girl at the time and growing into a woman. How
Oh
influential
God.
do you feel like her doing for self, her being this matriarch, having to kind of put the family on her back? How much do you think that's impacted on the person that you are?
Oh my God. It's been probably one of the biggest influences for me, because
Hmm.
I would see my mum like work like 2 part-time jobs.
Yeah,
And then like we used to like Greenwich Market's around the corner
yeah.
from where we used to live in the block. So like on a Sunday or on a Saturday, even after working all week, she would be up all night cooking. And then
Hmm.
my brother and I would run to the market back and forth selling food from the flat. Do you know
Oh
what I'm
wow.
saying? And that
Yeah.
was when I was like 14, like 13,
Okay.
14s, even younger. I mean, yeah, it was kind of like it's in the blood for us to kind of hustle. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
So for me growing up, when I was at primary school, I would make and sell friendship bracelets for like £1. You know,
Okay.
got to secondary school, started plaiting hair for £10. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
You know, I've always had like other things that I could do. So my mum kind of ingrained it in us to have a residual income, although she didn't have that language at the time.
I fully hear
That's
you.
what she was doing, you know. So
Hmm.
I've kind of grown up knowing that I'm capable of doing anything alone, like
Hmm.
without the presence of a partner or
Okay.
a support network. I can
Yeah.
do it. And so I think even though growing up at the time, it was really hard to kind of process that,
Yeah.
process like not having mum around and having to spend time with my grandma,
Hmm.
seeing her work so hard in my mind was a thing of, well, there's no excuses for
Yeah.
you. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Hmm.
If you want something, it's on you to sort that out. So that's kind of the mentality that I've kind of been left with, you know?
No, I hear you. I hear you.
Mm.
Yeah, that sparked a little thought in my mind, but we're gonna come back to that at a later point.
All
Um,
right.
if not today, then next time.
Yeah.
Um, I
Mm.
definitely hear that. See, that's an interesting thing because that kind of it's a question that I have to myself that about the whole, when you've got an absentee father, you've got a mother that kind of puts the family on her back and kind of works and
Mm.
doesn't spend the time. Do you consciously remember when you were young actually thinking that you are not a priority to your mother, or is it something that you've kind of thought about as you've got older? If that question makes Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think as a young person, I didn't understand how much my mom was doing. You know,
Mhm.
we're all guilty of that to a degree.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I kind of did think like I didn't feel like she loved me as much because, you know, I've got a little brother, and I don't
Mhm.
know about you, but like I find that in a lot of West Indian families, the mothers tend to favor the sons, you understand? And they're
Yeah.
really harsh on their daughters, right? And
I
I
think
like
it's
my
I think
mom.
it's all families, to be honest. I was
Do you
having this
think
conversation.
so?
I do. I think don't lose it where you was gonna go
I
with
won't
this.
stick a
All right,
pin.
cool.
Yeah.
All right. But I was having this conversation not long yesterday, maybe the day before, about just kind of how the whole term mummy's boys and daddy's girls and that sort of dynamic, where that kind of comes from. And like,
Yeah.
a lot of stereotypes are kind of rooted in some universal kind of truths underlying stuff,
Mhm. Mhm.
or
Mhm.
universal observations. Let me not say truths, because some things,
Or
it's all about
universal ideologies or
all of these things
programming.
all of these things. So yeah, we could talk about how
Yeah.
how how they came to be is a different thing, but the fact of just
Mm.
seeing something, and I do see that I'm noticing, especially with friends that have got their children, that it is very much a kind of, dads do tend to be softer and be more nurturing, whether it's
Mhm.
through societal programming or not. That seems
Mm.
to be a thing, and I feel like mothers tend to be a bit harder on their daughters, just
Mhm.
because of for the same reason that a father would be harder on their son, because they know the dangers, they can see the decisions, because they understand what it is to
Mm.
be a young girl. So
Mm.
yeah, I don't think it's just specific to West Indians or even specific just to black people. I think it is a I
Mm.
think it is just a societal thing that
Mm. Mm.
that we as people then kind of almost, I don't know what the word is, whether it's I don't know if self-fulfilling prophecy is one of those things, but you know, you kind of
Well,
almost
it
speak it into
self-perpetuates,
existence.
isn't it?
That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you very
Yeah,
much. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
Okay, that's okay. Oh, I might have to look into some research around that, because those
yeah.
kind of dynamics are always interesting to me.
Mm,
But yeah, I did feel like my mum had favoritism between my
mhm,
brother and I. So,
mhm.
you know, she'd be like, Jun Jun, sunshine, and I'll be like, and she'd be like, Mackie,
Yeah,
come and
yeah,
do the
yeah, yeah.
washing up. Do you know
The
what I mean?
harsh,
I'm
the
like,
hardness.
why am I getting the licks and he's not getting the licks? Do you know what I
No,
mean?
I hear you. I hear
But
you. I hear you. Uh,
um yeah, I think that there was an element of, you know, feeling kind of rejected on multiple fronts
mhm.
that made me think, you know what, fuck it, like, what am I trying for? Do you know what I mean?
I hear that.
mm,
I do.
mm,
I definitely hear and identify with that emotion of feeling
mm.
like you almost can't do anything right. So
You
you
know
might
what
as
I
well just
mean?
do what you want to do, innit?
Do what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? Do what you,
Yeah.
I mean, like, my grandfather, he's not with us anymore, but he
God
was
bless.
like adamant that I'd go to uni, that I studied, because from I was young, everyone said I was bright. I was just different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, we we didn't get on, and he was like, go to uni, go to this, and I was like, okay, but where are you? Like, you're not supporting me, you're not here, you're making all these demands of me, but where are you, type thing. So I was just,
I presume, yeah, you and your mum probably had, as all of us did, probably just up and down relationship. But as
yeah,
as a grown up now, and if
yeah.
you was to kind of, I don't know, characterize her, describe her, um, not just the influence she had on her life, but her as a person,
Mm.
how would you do that? What would you say?
um i would I would say, to describe her
Hmm.
as a person or as a
Yeah.
mother,
Um,
because we're not, then the two are not into, you know,
I hear
they're
you.
not the
All right,
same thing.
okay, let's do person first, and then we'll
Yeah.
do mother after.
Okay, as a person, my mum's got a good heart.
Hmm.
You know, she can be very kind, she can be very empathic. She's a hard worker, she's got a brilliant work ethic.
Hmm.
She is fierce about protecting her children. She once chased a man around Greenwich with a flipping knife in a bag and got arrested. Do you know what I
Hang on,
mean? Because
I'm
the man
rating it.
tried to dash me over one rail and hold me by the Thames. Do you get me? So
Yeah.
fierce defender of children.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, just like different. My mom's very witchy. She's very witchy.
Okay.
And she allowed my brother and I to kind of be who we were. She never tried to kind of like mold us into her idea of who we're gonna be.
Well.
You know, she kind of just, she let us grow, but she directed us as much as she could. And
Hmm.
you know, you know, as a person, she tries to be the best person she can, and that's all we all do, really, isn't it?
Hmm.
That's it.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
as a mother.
Brethren.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Talk to me.
joking. I'm joking.
Talk to me. Talk to me.
Woo! Okay, so she's mellowed. She's mellowed. You know, since she became grandma,
Yeah, yeah,
she's
yeah.
mellowed, right?
That's what I hear. I hear
And
that happens.
it happens. Trust me. And it's a big, big turnaround as well. It's just like, what? But as a mum, very much the disciplinarian, didn't take a bar of it from us. I mean, one look sideways and you felt the belt or the slipper, like
Yeah.
all of the classic tools of torture that we've all become accustomed to. Do
To the
you know what I
tools of
mean?
torture, you know.
Tools of torture, bruv. Do you know what I mean? Like, that belt buckle was hard.
Yeah, yeah,
Yo.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But I
I hear
always
you.
preferred the slipper.
Yeah.
But
To be
oh
fair, the slipper
gosh.
I held, I only got the slipper one time, and it gave me a black eye.
Yo, well,
So
yeah.
my mum was much more like, it was more whatever was close to hand kind of thing.
Whatever she could grab in it. Yeah,
Yeah.
them one. Yeah, yeah. I didn't have that. My mum had a wooden spoon with our names on it. My name on one side, my brother's name on the other. You understand?
That's militant, boy.
No joking. Yeah, so my mum was militant. She
That
was
sounds it.
militant.
That sounds
She
militant
was, she
still.
was, she was. But there was things that were out of her control,
Hmm.
you know, that she couldn't have helped. Do you know what I mean? So like, if you're working how many jobs, you can't constantly watch your children. It's just a fact, you know. And so, you know, but those weren't her shortcomings as far as I'm concerned. She wasn't an easy mum, Chuks. Like, I struggled with my mum. You know, I grew up for a long time feeling like she didn't love me or she didn't want me. So that was always very, very difficult. But looking back, having experienced the things that she's experienced as a woman and as a mum, like, even though I don't agree with all of her methodologies and her stances, I get it. Do you know what I'm saying?
I definitely hear you.
Because my foot hasn't touched jail yet, you know, and I know as a woman, it's not as likely, but trust me, the potential was there.
No, I hear
you know.
I hear you. I definitely hear you.
I think she was a good mum for what she, you know, in the situation which she was in. Remember, like, black people or black women have been living in times of austerity long before they mentioned the word austerity. So when I look at the situation, you know, I'm just like, you know what, mum, you did what you could with what you had.
No,
and I don't begrudge her that, you know.
So, all right, so school. So you obviously your mum's placed education, reading at the kind of, I don't know, maybe some, if not the top, but somewhere near the top of priorities when it comes to you being the best you. So how were you at school? What sort were you a good student? Was you a bad gal? Who was you?
Oh man. Ooh, okay. So there are 3 stages in my kind of educational background, right?
Okay.
There's the first 2, which would be primary, secondary, / college, and then there's the third, which came later in life.
Right.
In my 30s, right? So I'll start from like primary school. So primary school, I went to a mixed hearing and deaf primary school. So I learned to use sign language from a very young age.
Wow.
Now I would only speak to the non-hearing people, even though I'm hearing myself.
Wow.
And that was like considered, because there's other things we could go into here that we'll touch on another time, or maybe even tonight. But when I was at school, I didn't talk to people. So if I wasn't talking to the hearing and the non-hearing, I was in the book corner like every playground. So I wasn't someone that mingled with people very much. And, you know, it was brought to my mum that they thought I had what was called learning disabilities back then, right? But because girls were overlooked for such things, nothing was ever kind of explored along that line.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So at the end of primary school, mum tried to put me into a really good school, Haberdasher Asks in New Cross. Back when it was a really good school. I don't know about how it is now. Okay. I've heard some stuff though. You had to sit an exam to get into that school back then, right? Right. And no one had gotten into that school from Meridian Primary School for 6 years, right? So my mum said to Mr. David Shuttle, I think his name was the head, and she said, listen, I want my girl to go to this school. And he said, look, I don't think she's going to get in. She's got problems with her peers. You know, she don't communicate. She don't talk. She's not on it, sort of thing. We think she has. Anyway, there was another girl, white girl. She also took the same exam. Long story short, I got in. She didn't. Boom, I'm into Haberdasher Asks. Yeah, cool. So again, the first few years at Asks, I was very, very quiet. And we've since found out that it is probably likely that I have something called what is it called? High performance autism. So that's a recent discovery now, right? So anyway, didn't talk. And then I realized that if I acted up, people would notice me. So I started acting up. And up until that point, my grades were like through the roof. I was doing very well. Right. And then they just came crashing down because I wanted to fit in, couldn't fit in. Yeah. Black girls didn't like me. It was an all-girls school, yeah? Okay. So the black girls didn't like me, the popular ones. The white girls didn't like me. The Asians didn't like me. So I kind of ended up hanging out with like a group of kind of like we were like the ethnic misfit like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
year, you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like no one wanted
Mm,
us, so we just kind of bunched up and shit. And then
yeah.
when I started getting a bit leery, you know, and started getting noticed, I started hanging out with more popular people.
Okay.
But wasn't coming to school, wasn't doing very well. Long story short, GCSEs, flunked them except for English and math, which I got A's and B's in.
Okay.
And
Right.
then bounced, decided to go to college, try and study a bit of law, bored the crap out of me. I was like, I want to make money. I've been poor my whole life. Screw this for a laugh. Let me go to work. So
Okay.
that's when my retail career started. Anyway, skip some years forward now. In 2012, I had my son.
Yeah.
I returned to work as in retail management.
Mm-hmm.
Noticed that every time I tried to apply for a more senior job, I couldn't get it, despite having had 13 years in retail management experience.
Mm.
And so I decided to go back and study. So in 2015, I did a diploma in medicine and medical biosciences at City and Islington College.
Right.
Passed that.
Right.
Went and applied for to do a degree at uni. So I went to UEL, you know, the University of East
Mm-hmm.
London.
Yeah.
Studied public health and health promotion there.
Mm-hmm.
Graduated with a first.
Wow.
And then from there, went to Queen Mary University, did a master's in global health law and governance,
Jeez.
and
My
graduated
head
with
has
a
sweat.
distinction.
Jeez.
So
Wow.
yeah, so long story short, I got there in the end.
Yeah, you definitely did.
Yeah, yeah. So
And that's
yeah,
all from what year? From what year to what year was all that? That
my
last
diploma and degrees.
year and all of
Oh
that.
my
Yeah.
God, since 2015, so I studied a solid 5 years. Lost a baby, had a baby, already had a son, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
moved house 3 times. Mate, yeah, it was tough. It was really, really tough. But the thing that got me through it
Mm.
was like the vast network of women around me.
Okay.
Simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Just to kind of jump back a little bit. See, when you was talking about when you were kind of, I don't know, struggling to be accepted and struggling to kind of
Mm.
fit in, and then there was that moment where you realized, you know, if I act up, I get some attention. Is that the reason why maybe in your mind you were so withdrawn in that school period because you didn't either you didn't feel accepted or you didn't know how to kind of navigate those social situations, or was it
Uh,
more them kind of just, I don't know, not liking you for whatever reason?
I think it was a bit of both. And I
Okay.
think there's a third factor in there, in
Right.
that I wasn't I wasn't a child that went to people's houses. Do you know what I mean? So I was very kind of, even though I had my block and my estate and I knew it like inside out, in
Mm.
terms of, you know, being around people that outside of those circles,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that, you know what,
Right.
or
Yeah.
what that was, because I didn't talk to people at primary school. So I just continued that into secondary.
Right.
So I think it's all three. I think it's wanting to be accepted. And the thing about asks was that a lot of the people that went to that school were very, very wealthy. You know, they had
Okay.
dough. I was
Mm-hmm.
coming in like hand-me-downs, bruv. Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, 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 yeah. No, I hear you.
like everyone's wearing nice trainers. I'm wearing like some Deptford Market trainers. Do you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
so there was
So
also that as well. Like everyone that
easy
has
to feel
money,
less than. Yeah, true.
yeah, like people that have money know when you're broke pocket in it. So,
Definitely.
and they see it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that didn't help. I think because of my appearance, you know, I think it made people unsure of how to gauge me and where to place me. Because, you know, people
Okay.
like to put people in
Yeah.
boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I couldn't kind of fit into a box. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely hear that.
So yeah, I think that's kind of, I think the acting up kind of thing, it
Mm.
seemed to work for other people, innit? So,
Mm.
and I was like, well, my mum's, in my mind at that time, I was like, my mum doesn't care because she's always working,
Mm-hmm.
right? My dad, I've not met. So that's kind of gone out the window. And yeah, in terms of friends, everyone's just doing what they're doing, you know. And you got to remember, a lot of my friends are from the block, so they're not in the same space academically, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go make some money. I got into modeling when I was 13, you know, carried on until I was like 27, 26. And you know, I made my little money. I made legal money, I made illegal money, you know what I'm saying? And I did what I did to get by, you know what I mean? And that's just it. That's just what I did.
All right, so see this time now. So you're at college, you're working. Are you still living with your mum, or have you moved out at this point?
Oh yeah, at college I was still with my mum. But I was in like a long-term childhood sweetheart type relationship as well.
Okay.
You know, so, you know, your boyfriend and then his mom's turfing you, you know, one of them teenage politics there, do you get me? So yeah, I mean, in terms of living, I've lived in so many different places. You know, I've lived all over Southeast London. And on occasion out of London, but at that time, yeah, I was more or less under the remit of my mum.
Okay. So trouble. So I sense that, you know, there was a time in your life where you weren't adverse to getting into trouble. Maybe you was around troublemakers. Maybe you were a ringleader in trouble. Who knows? I don't know. But without obviously incriminating yourself. but you know what I mean? Is that something that was an element of your history?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've done things as a young person that if I had been caught, you know, I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough that I didn't get caught, right? When I did get caught, it was at a protest and I was like 26 years old, I think, you know. But that was in my like mid-20s, and that was, you know, I was very much in control of what I was doing back then. I knew what I was doing and I knew why I was doing it. I attended a protest. It was because the tuition fee for uni had tripled. You know, prior to that, the government said they weren't going to trouble university tuition fees. They did exactly that. And I had planned to go and study that January.
Right.
So I went to a protest and, you know, was subsequently arrested. My modelling career had been really, really good. And I mean, really good. I had done London Fashion Week. I had been asked to go to represent the UK at Atlanta Fashion Week. You know, I was training models. I was organising portfolio shoots. I had my own self-contained business and it was doing very well. So when I got arrested, the Daily Mail got a hold of the story and just totally wrecked my career. And I had people calling for me to be hung. You know, I was arrested the following year. I went to court. I was pregnant. I was newly pregnant with my son. And, you know, there were 3 occasions where like stories were printed and they weren't accurate. They weren't true. And people were asking me like, why a 30? Sorry, children have come in there. And people were saying things like, you know, she shouldn't have her baby. I hope her unborn child dies. Like people were saying like really bad things. And then like the clients that I had obviously distanced themselves because it would tarnish their own image to the public. So yeah, long story short, my modeling career was over as a result of that activity.
What was this all like newspapers and
my mom was on the way to work. At the time I was working at a school in Elephant and Castle called the Globe Academy.
Right.
And I was working as a chef there. And my mum and I weren't talking at this time. So anyway, this comes about. Mum's on her way to work on the DLR, opens the bloody Metro, and my face is like in the middle of the flipping paper.
Oh no.
And the way the media reported it, they reported it as pregnant woman attacks officer in a flurry of fists, right?
Oh,
so they
wow.
framed it like I was pregnant at the time and that I attacked this police officer, right?
Wow.
Which was nonsense. I wasn't pregnant and I didn't attack this police officer. I defended myself against her. Do you feel me? And all of the evidence that would have proved that mysteriously went missing on the court day.
No way.
Swear down. Even the officer who claimed that I hurt her, like for the first sitting, she didn't even turn up. And all of her colleagues that would have backed her story, they were all on holiday.
Trying not to perjure themselves.
They stitched me up good and proper, you know. They stitched me up good and proper. But fortunately, it was my first offence. So, you know, I got a blight and I got fined. But I mean, I laugh now, right? But at the time, it was life-changing. Like,
no, I hear you.
If this hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have gone to uni and I wouldn't have 2 degrees now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was a blessing, but it didn't feel that way. Yeah.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's intense. So modeling was something that you sounds like it, especially at that time. I don't know about now, but I'm just saying, especially at that time, it sounded like that was a passion for you. That was something that you kind of, you know, like how some people are like, I'm gonna be a footballer, and they do everything and they get there, and something happens to kind of, I don't know, derail them from that goal. At that time, you must have felt a level of, I don't know if disappointment's even the right word, but you know, being lost or
I was
being
heartbroken.
resentful. Yeah, heartbroken.
All of that, because at that time, when I was sentenced and so on and so forth, I was going through a lot of difficulty with my son's dad, you know, and he was riding off the wave of this, right? So this was great for him, you know.
Oh, wow.
She's the crazy violent baby mother type, and it worked in his favor. So it was really difficult because I was not only having to deal with, you know, the career that I'd built up and I'd worked really, really hard on, you know, and then like having it kind of just swept from underneath my feet like that, you know, whilst kind of having to deal with the kind of, you know, politics that goes on in relationships and stuff. So yeah, it was hard. I'm not gonna lie, like it did. You know, I had my heart set on modeling, not as a model, but as somebody in the industry that could pull up more people like me. And it was happening. You know what I mean? It was happening. I was training trans men to walk. You know what I'm saying? Like I was training men to walk like women and women to walk like men. And I was training people that had never walked in their life. Do you know what I mean? And then I was training people that were about to go and fly off to do like a Vogue shoot in Paris. Do you know what I mean? So like at that point in my life, I felt like, like I've put in a solid bit of work, you know, about 10 years worth of work. I was choreographing fashion shows. I was up for a BAFTA award as best choreographer and fashion and model trainer alongside the man that trained me to model. You know what I mean? So I was doing really well. So yeah, it was a huge blow. Having said that, in the background of my modeling career, like I said, I had a solid retail management career. So I still had that to go back to.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't completely lost. It just meant that I had to go back into an industry which had nowhere for me to go in it, you know. Whereas modeling, you network, you meet people. Do you know what I mean? You can find yourself anywhere.
Yeah, you can make things of it. All right. Okay, so where I want to go next really is where did this I don't know, this political mind, this love of, I don't know, knowledge, sociology, philosophy, like
Mm,
this is my, obviously we don't know each
I
other,
love
but
knowledge, man.
this
Books,
is
man. It's my
this is that
thing.
this is that thing. This is what I want to know. Where did you get that from? Do you think?
I can tell you the first instance of a political awareness that I had.
Yeah, please.
I remember it like it was yesterday. I
Mm,
was 9 years old.
mhm,
Them times I think Linford Christie was the guy. You know what I
mhm.
mean? He was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
guy on
Mhm,
track and field, right?
mhm,
And we were watching, my mum and myself and my brother in the front room one evening watching TV. And I said to my mum, I'd watched the adverts, I'd watched, everything. And I said to my mum, why are there no black people on TV?
mm,
And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, where can I find out? And she said, you have to read. And I was
mhm.
like, okay. And then not long after that, at primary school, we learnt the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King, right?
Okay.
And so I, being the very strange child I was,
Yeah.
after hearing it in assembly, I went to the teacher and asked if I could have a copy on tape to take home and listen to, because I
Mhm.
wanted to learn all the words, right?
Yeah.
So my kind of political, questioning the politics of things started from very, very young.
Mhm.
And it was encouraged. And I think the other thing that was an influence was my uncle Mark. He's my grandmother's youngest child,
Okay.
and he's the last of five.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time with him when I was young. And
Mhm.
in his room, he'd make me do all that foolishness, take my cup down to grandma, so she won't cuss me out and that. But
Yeah.
in his room, he had like the Malcolm X picture, the one where he's got the gun and he's looking
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
the blind and that, right? He had
Mhm.
that. He had like a lot of pro-black kind of messages in his room.
Mhm.
And then like the music he listened to was very, very rebellious, but also very pro-black. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And he'd have books about black nationalists like Garvey lying around. And I've even got his first book on Malcolm X, like one old school 1980s copy of something that's mad
Yeah.
colourful. But
Wow.
I kept it, right?
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think that was definitely he was definitely an influence in my political awareness. That's where that came from.
Okay. So it's seems like he was kind of almost raised in that with the information accessible to you, and the
Mm, mm.
influential people around you maybe had enough, or the people around you had enough influence or respect from you for you to
Mm.
kind of, I don't know, delve into their interests, and that sparked your interest.
I think that's definitely it. And I think being a child who had no interest in speaking with children my age,
Hmm.
I was the child that wanted to talk with the adults. I'd sit in on big people conversation. I had no interest in playing chase around the garden. I want to listen to what you lot are saying.
Yeah.
So like my mum, her friends, when she'd have friends around, I'd be like in the conversation and you wouldn't even
Hmm.
notice I was there, but I was there and I was listening.
Hmm.
Sometimes my mom would come home from like a shift at a club,
Yeah.
and she'd come home and she'd have her friend George, he rest in peace, he's gone, but he was a good friend of hers, and
Mm.
he'd walk her home and, him and I would sit there and have like crazy political conversations.
Wow.
My godparents, one was French, one was Scottish. My
Right.
godfather's Scottish, he's passed away now. But but both of them when they were together,
Mm.
I remember them saying things to me like, Mackie, when you're older, don't vote Tory. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't vote for Thatcher. Like,
Yeah.
and I didn't know what the hell they were talking about, but I tell you what, I knew who Tony Blair was. I
Yeah.
knew who
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher was. Do
Yeah.
you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I knew these things because people talked politics around me, because
Uh-huh.
and I wanted them to. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think my inquisitive nature as a child and that kind of, and I think it is down to this kind of autism type stuff,
Hmm.
where autistic children either tend to go one way or the other. So they want to hang out with very young people or hang out with very old people. And I went that
Right.
direction.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
interesting. how do you, what are the differences between you as a parent and your mum as a parent, and then afterwards,
Okay.
what are the similarities? Where do you think
Okay.
you cross over?
Differences. I don't beat my children. I don't
Mhm.
hit my children. Um, I don't think it's necessary. You
Mhm.
know, I think that there are other ways to deal with that, and I
Mhm.
think that that beating of children and beating altogether is
Mhm.
something that kind of echoes the kind of part of our history of enslavement, you know, and force and abuse and submission, you know what I mean, through
Mhm.
violence. So
Mhm.
because I feel like a lot of those traditions are rooted in that, it's
Mhm.
something that I don't continue in my house.
That's interesting.
Um, I try not to shout. My mum used to shout a lot out of frustration. I get it.
Mhm.
I
Yeah, yeah,
totally
yeah.
get it.
Mhm.
As a mum of two children, I try not to shout. And I've actually looked into parenting, different types of parenting.
Yeah.
And often, if you don't know that there are ways to parent, then you can't action those ways to parent. Do you know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know about concerted cultivation and accomplishment of natural growth. So
Okay.
concerted cultivation
Right.
is a parenting method that essentially says that when you provide children with extracurricular activities, additional classes, and you structure their lives
Mm.
around attainment of knowledge and growth with a very deliberate intention,
Mm.
the children tend to come out very well rounded in that situation, right? And when I say well rounded, what I mean is, you know, they have other hobbies and interests they pursue, right?
Mm.
They learn how to create social networks, and, you know, so let's say you go to karate, you learn how to socially interact, right? You
Mhm.
learn that there are different rules in different contexts. So you have a broadened experience as a child,
Yeah.
and that, in essence, that opens up the child to learn and want to learn other things. Now, with accomplishment of natural growth,
Mhm.
that says that you allow a child to become whatever they're going to become,
Yeah.
right? The problem with that is if a society tells a child that they're going to go to jail,
Mhm.
and the parent isn't around to counteract that dominant belief, that hegemonic belief in society,
Right.
then the child eventually grows into that mold. Do you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
So because I know this, I've implemented this in my home, you know,
What
and
does that
I
look
think
like?
that's
What
the
does that look
difference.
like? What does that look like?
So in my home, that looks like my son being encouraged to do jujitsu, um, you know, encouraged to, he's into, what is it called again first? That jumping thing that you like? Parkour, that's it.
Hardcore. Mhm.
So he wants to do parkour.
Mhm.
So now he's 8, he can do it. So that's something that I'm going to get him into. He
Okay.
studies Mandarin at school. Like, my son can talk Mandarin, you know?
Wow.
So, so in my house, it looks like multi-talented children,
Mhm.
you know, and children that want to learn, as opposed to children resisting learning because no one's gone over the learning with them, or no one's asked them what they're interested in learning, because
Okay.
he knows that he has to study at school, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he also knows that there's room for him to look at the things that he wants to study outside of school.
Okay.
And when he chooses something, I encourage that. I might not understand it,
Mhm.
but I encourage that.
So that looks like you almost invest in. It sounds to me, it looks like you invest in time in
Mm,
observing and talking to your children about what it is, and seeing what it is they like, and
mm-hmm,
being supportive of that,
mm,
almost to, I don't know if it's um more than what you feel is necessary or a priority, but
mm.
at least a comparable level of time and investment made in those
Yeah,
things is what you're talking about. Is
yeah.
is what, because obviously I haven't got no children yet, but when I do, it's like
Mm,
that's what I think about. How do I um create? Because there's no motivation like self motivation.
mm-hmm.
You know, fear is a good motivator, and
Mm,
anger, and all these, and I don't know, wanting to please people. All these things are good motivators, but none of them compare to self-motivation. So
right.
I do always wonder when I can almost smell a conversation about how to create self-motivation. So that's something that interests me. So it's very much about kind of creating that environment from
It
your
is.
standpoint.
It's
Yeah.
about leading by example. I mean, the whole time when I was doing my first degree,
Hmm.
my son, when I started, it would have been what, 6, 5? How old are you? 8. Yeah. So you would have been what, 3 or 4 when I started my degree.
Mm.
Yeah. And like, and a 30 saw me sitting up until like I'd be studying when he went to bed,
Hmm.
and I'd still be up studying when he woke up. And he
Hmm.
saw the sacrifices that I
Yeah.
put that I made
Yeah.
to study, and he'd say, "Mom, let's go and do this," and I'd be like, "Baby, I can't, I gotta study. Baby, I can't, I gotta study." It was always the answer.
Mm.
And then he saw me graduate, and
Hmm.
you see that day that I graduated, it
Hmm.
was filmed, right?
Mm.
And I look, when I hear the video back and I look back,
Mm.
in the background, all you can hear are 30, this boy with the biggest mouth, right? That's my mom!
No
That's my
way.
mommy! Ah! And you could hear him like bursting into tears. Like he's
Oh, bless
screaming,
him.
but he's crying, right?
Mm.
And at that point, he saw everything I'd worked for, right?
Yeah.
He
You
saw
saw
he
the
saw
payoff,
why I
yeah.
did it. He
Yeah.
saw everything, right?
Hmm.
He saw what hard work does and what you can achieve, yeah? And you see that feeling, like even just thinking about it, it makes me
Yeah, yeah, I can
emotional,
imagine. I
right?
can
It
imagine.
does. But even thinking, oh my, like my son saw that. And that means if he could see me do it, he can see him doing it. Do you
Hmm.
understand? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents have expectations of their children that they have not themselves met in their own lives for
Hmm.
themselves. So my thing is, you can't lay these expectations down on children unless they've seen you put that work in too, because
Hmm.
then they're going to respect that work and be like, okay, I know I've got no excuse because I saw mummy do it pregnant. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? I saw
Hmm.
mummy write a dissertation whilst breastfeeding, which by the way, I got a first for. Yeah. Like, you know, he saw everything.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just think that when it comes to parenting, you have to be the example. You have to be that person that says, okay, cool, I saw that this didn't work in my childhood. I saw that these parenting techniques were not beneficial to me, aside from creating fear and anxiety. So
Hmm.
what am I going to do to change that? And you know, when I reflect on my own experiences and what worked for me and what worked and how those things made me feel,
Yeah.
you know, it made me think about, well, how do I make my children feel? Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean? Do
Hmm.
they know that I love them? Do they know that education is paramount in this? Like, do they know that? You
Hmm.
know, and I can't expect them to know that unless they know that mummy sees it that way and daddy sees it that way.
Hmm.
So that's
Definitely.
where I'm at.
Yeah, that's big. I think that's important. It's about kind of almost creating the culture of your family,
Precisely,
you know?
precisely.
Yeah.
And
No,
not
I hear you.
perpetuating those beliefs about, you know, black people can't survive in education. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Yes, we know that the faculty, all of them are institutionally racist. We know
Hmm.
that. The
Hmm.
hospital, NHS, the police, the black report, we know that these places are racist. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't interrupt those spaces with our blackness and with who we are. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? So my
Hmm.
thing is, you know what, yeah? Yes, I thought school was pants. Do you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Yes, I messed up at school, but you know what? I was wrong. Do you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? I was
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
But
You could have found a
it's
way to
what you
navigate
it's
through.
well, this is I think it's attitudinal. I think that you can adopt the attitude that, okay, you're gonna have to work harder. Yes, you are. You're gonna have to prove. Yes, you are. All of the things that you were taught about being black and being at school are
Hmm.
true.
Hmm.
Let's not fuck around. Yeah,
Hmm.
boys are excluded at how many times the rates of girls. Do you understand?
Yeah.
We know what one for that. But
Hmm.
my thing is, okay, not to entertain respectability politics, but there are tools there that away from that environment you can use for your own benefit. You need to take that shit and make
Hmm.
it work. You know what I'm saying?
I fully hear you. I fully hear you.
That's where I'm at.
All right, listen.
Mm.
I'm so appreciative.
3%.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm out of it. I'm out of it. I'm
Yeah.
so appreciative. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
It has
man.
been it has been amazing. There's so many nuggets. I'm gonna enjoy editing this so much.
Oh
Um,
my God.
I'm gonna find so many little nuggets.
Little sound bites and
Yeah,
little
loads of
gems
them,
and that.
loads of little gems,
Yeah.
exactly that. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially you got the little ones running around.
Yeah,
Um,
man. Cool.
so yeah, man, I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon and like the page so at least you know when the interview's coming out, innit?
Say no, I will. I will. No, and like honestly, like thank you for like the invite. Like we could do this all flipping week. We could do a show a week. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
facts.
Maybe we should think about coming up with like a list of discussions and stuff. But I know
Don't
there's
worry,
other
that's
people we
already
have
in
to
that's
interview.
nah, that's already in the pipeline. I've got
Listen,
somebody
the
that
thing's gonna shut off now. It's just told me
yeah,
30 seconds in it.
listen,
So
salute, love every time. I really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. All right.
thank you.
Too
Soon
much
come.
information. Big up, love.
Whoa.